Hey, we are live and good afternoon. Thanks everybody for joining me. There's so much going on right now that I just thought I had to come back and just give a little bit more of an explanation from my perspective on some top issues. First of all, I ended up having a little bit of a free morning. So I went downtown to the federal courthouse and I listened in on the Madigan trial. And I wanted to do this. It's closing argument times. I was curious about what the prosecution was going to say in their closing arguments, as I initially had thought that the case that they had set out was not maybe as strong as they could have. I mean, I think what they were trying to basically tell people and explain to folks that Madigan held all the cards all the time, held all the power, and proving that is not as easy as just listening to some phone calls that were taped, reading some emails. You really have to understand the type of power that Madigan wielded over his members. And I honestly think that they probably could have called in 118 legislators and had them explain exactly how powerful that man was. I was also very curious about the closing arguments because I knew that some of what they were going to cover were bills that I sat through, times that I was down there, people that I knew that were being, talked about on certain emails and in terms of the bribery scheme. So I was very curious what they said. And I have to say the prosecutor did an excellent job. I believe her name is Julia Schwartz. She did a great job in very systematically explaining what the charges were, explaining the elements of the charges, and then actually pointing to the evidence about how you can prove and you can make connections to emails and phone calls and texts and everything else that not Madigan's texts, but other people's, that Madigan was definitely involved in some sort of bribery scheme. That's to me, it's pretty obvious after looking at the evidence now for a second time. Some of it I had seen previously when I had actually sat in on the trial, and then I got another look at it again today. And of course, Madigan, there's basically 5 different types of bribery that he's being charged under. One is pertaining to subcontractors that he demanded get hired. Another one is a law firm contract. I believe that's with Reyes Curson that he demanded be used by ComEd. There's the board appointment by Juan Ochoa. So that was another form of bribery with ComEd. There were other hires that were bribery, and then there was an intern program. Literally, Madigan's office is recommending summer interns to ComEd, and ComEd is acting on those immediately. And you just got to wonder, that doesn't make sense. But again, it was all part of the pay-to-play atmosphere down there. So I found it very interesting. I mean, some of the testimony was really, really good. There's one particular person who, a lady named Kathy Lasky, she struggled in interviews. She was really tough to place, but she was a high-level referral by Madigan. And so, they raised it up to Ann Parmigiani's level. Here she's dealing with some intern, and they raised it all the way up to the top of the ComEd ladder, the very top, and essentially force her to be hired by ComEd. I mean, it's when you read it all, when you actually sit there and listen to the testimony, it's pretty interesting. There was another candidate. Her name is Jackie Sweeney. I wonder if she's any relationship to somebody else powerful. I don't know. I haven't checked that out. Just making that, just wondering right now. There was another summer intern, a Mary Vincent. She was another one of these people that, Madigan was told to hire Madigan told ComEd to hire as a summer intern. It is also interesting. They talked a lot about the AT&T issue as well. AT&T is part of this bribery scheme. And essentially they were told that they needed to hire Acevedo. And, within the span of a month, it goes from, we need to place. Acevedo goes and asks Madigan for a job after he gets out of the state legislature in February. And by April, he's hired by hired by AT&T. AT&T, and it gets paid for all of April, even though he did no work. And in fact, it was very obvious that he did no work ever. And that all came out in testimony I didn't see, but was referred to in today's trial. So all in all, I found it extremely interesting to again, look at the evidence that the federal government has on Madigan and hear some of the tapes again. And you'd have to be extremely naive not to believe that he actually did what they say he did. And so I have a little bit more confidence now after sitting in that, maybe Mike Madigan does get convicted. And I personally think he should. But then again, I think he's done such other egregious things to the state of Illinois in the 50 years that he was in power and the 36 years that he was the Speaker of the House. Maybe it was 37. That I think that he should go away. Honestly, he should be, everything from a broken pension system that he perpetuated to just all the other terrible pieces of legislation that he's been a part of over the years. So anyway, that trial should continue with, I think the prosecution is going to finish their closing arguments tomorrow. Then the defense will pick up their closing arguments, probably finish on Friday, and maybe the jury will get the case on Monday of next week. So it's been a really long case. I think it started October 10th. So that's okay. There was a lot to go through. It was important stuff to do, and he is a big fish. And I hope he goes to jail. I really do. Hope he ends up right next to his buddy former Alderman Burke. Okay, another story that I wanted to talk about is, and it broke basically yesterday, is this whole thing that Stellantis is now going to come back and build trucks in Belvedere, apparently. Now, if you remember, I wrote about this at the time that it was happening. This was the UAW strike that was a big issue. And Shawn Fain, the head of the UAW, demanded that in order for, they had settled with General Motors. They had settled with Ford. They did not settle with Stellantis. They were the last people to end the UAW strike. Gosh, was this already in 2023? Was this over a year ago? I think it might have been. Anyway, they were the last people to end the strike. And their demand was that Stellantis reopen the Belvedere plant. And so, of course, to great fanfare, they settled the strike, promising a $5 billion investment there, an EV manufacturing facility, an EV battery facility is there, as well as there, and some sort of like logistics center as well for parts. So that's what the promise was. And they were going to promise $5 billion in investment. And of course, Governor Pritzker is right there applauding the whole deal, super excited about it. And of course, when it comes to EVs or EV batteries, we know what that means in the state of Illinois. That means that taxpayers are going to put out hundreds of millions of dollars to get the deal done. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to do any of this. I mean, so $500 million to Goshen, $827 million to Rivian, and now Stellantis is coming in and looking for a handout and essentially gets that approval, which we can't see yet. We don't know that, but I can sense it. I just know that in the back of all of this was a deal cut by Pritzker using taxpayer money to end the UAW strike and promise Stellantis hundreds of millions of dollars if they would reopen Belvedere. Now, none of that is known yet. Well, then what happens? Stellantis essentially says, look, market's not good for this. We're not doing this. And so they keep nursing it along, not doing anything until UAW finally comes to them and says, look, you promised you'd reopen this plant. You've not made no effort to do that yet. And we are going to sue you over a violation of the UAW agreement that you said you're going to open this plant and you're not doing it. Okay, fast forward. Now Trump comes in, has threatened tariffs on Mexico, has threatened tariffs on Canada. And Stellantis, knowing that these threats are real, and now that Trump is in office, he can actually make good on them, says, hey, guess what? We're coming back to America. We're moving Canadian operations back to America. We're going to open up our Dodge Durango production in Detroit, and we're going to start producing trucks in Belvedere. What is missing from this entire story, and thank you to John Pletz, Crane's Chicago Business. They're very, very good on this topic. They're good on energy. They're good on the EV stuff. You get great data from them, and I do appreciate that. And John Pletz writes in today's Crane's Chicago Business, one thing missing from yesterday's Stellantis announcement that it will reopen its plant near Rockford to make trucks is whether it will one day make EVs and batteries as originally planned. Saving the Belvedere factory from permanent closure was a key part of a new contract with the United Auto Workers in 2023. Okay, it was 2023. Stellantis originally agreed to make an electric truck at Belvedere, create a new EV battery facility, and expand its parts distribution facility in a regional mega hub. Altogether, the company had expected to invest $5 billion, just like I said, including $3.2 billion for the battery plant, and employ 3,500 to 4,000 workers. 3,500 to 4,000 workers. Stellantis said yesterday it will employ about 1,500 people. That's a huge difference. Building new trucks with an expected investment of $1.2 billion. It didn't. So that's a lot different than $5 billion and 4,000 workers. Now you're at $1.2 billion and 1,500 people. It didn't say whether those trucks will be electric, hybrid, or conventional vehicles. So yeah, we don't know what's happening. I assure you though, and by the way, you had Durbin and Duckworth and Eric Sorensen and Bill Foster and J.B. Pritzker patting themselves on the back. Hey, Belvedere's going to open up. They're patting themselves on the back, and I have no doubt in my mind that he put our money, our tax money behind that plant, behind that deal. And meanwhile, Trump's patting himself on the back, saying, "Oh, I did it because you know what? I've got." We're gonna make these tariffs work, and so they brought back their operations from Canada. Okay, honestly, I don't want taxpayer money involved. If they came back because of the tariffs, okay, great, but I don't want to be subsidizing that comeback with taxpayer money, and I certainly don't want it to go to an EV plant at all. A plant where, if it's anything like Rivian, they have never made a profit in their entire time in operation. Ever. So we don't need to be subsidizing that. That's called crony capitalism. That's not something that we should be doing. And it's certainly not something the state of Illinois can afford. So I wanted to give a little bit of update on that. The next thing I wanted to talk about is Pritzker. He put out this memo. The Illinois Department of Corrections put out this memo to all agency staff from IDOC Legal Services. This is dated January 21st. I just got a hold of this today from State Representative Chris Miller. He sent it to me, and I thought, well, this is interesting. And essentially, the memo says that pursuant to the act. Oh, well, it starts out this: pursuant to the Trust Act, that's the Sanctuary State Act that Rauner signed, that some stupid Republicans actually voted for. But according to, in 2017, this was. Pursuant to the Illinois Trust Act, the Illinois Department of Corrections is prohibited from detaining an individual solely based on immigration detainer or non-judicial immigration warrant. All individuals in custody are to be released at the expiration of their sentence. Unless there is a valid judicial warrant, all individuals will be released at the expiration of their sentence from a correctional facility shall be released in accordance with their transportation release plan. Immigration detainers or non-judicial civil immigration warrants shall not be logged into the 0360 in the warrant screen. Warrants deemed to be criminal or judicial shall continue to be maintained in the master file and in the 0360. I don't actually know what that is. Some sort of file where they keep criminal warrants separated. Okay, unless otherwise limited by federal law, individuals in custody may not be denied services, benefits, privileges, or opportunities, including but not limited to eligibility or placement in a lower custody classification, educational, rehabilitative, or diversionary programs on the basis of their citizenship, immigration status, the issuance of an immigration detainer or civil warrant against the individual, or the individual being involved in immigration removal proceedings. So what does that tell you? Governor Pritzker is doubling down on the Illinois Trust Act, on sanctuary state, and he is essentially saying that unless presented with a federal criminal warrant or otherwise required by federal law, the department's staff may not participate, support, or assist in any capacity with an immigration agent's enforcement operation. That's an ICE operation. That includes coordinating arrest at a courthouse, department facility, or hospital, providing the immigration agent with the use of any department equipment, transporting an individual in custody at the request of an immigration agent, establishing a security perimeter, or providing on-site support for an immigration agent. No help to ICE at all when they have they know in their jail, and they're getting to release them for whatever reason. Maybe they serve their term. Maybe they're in a prison. They serve the term. Maybe they're in jail and they're going to be released on parole, whatever it might be. But they can no way interact with ICE when they go to release that individual. And that particular individual is eligible for all benefits as would a normal citizen be allowed to have if they're incarcerated. So they can go to education stuff. They can do whatever they want, any benefits. Yep, there you go. He's doubling down on sanctuary state. The last thing I wanted to get to, and I did bring this up, I think, yesterday, and I mentioned, look, Trump is very, very serious about ridding DEI out of the government. And he's going to use the power of the purse to do so. That he was very specific about that. What you saw happen in the military is pretty incredible. I think I mentioned yesterday, you could go to West Point's curriculum and they no longer have a diversity minor listed at all. And so people are ridding their laptops or their websites with all sorts of diversity stuff. And he doubled down today again and made another comment saying that essentially that if you get any federal funding, Pell grants, we get a lot of research grants at our universities. If you get any of that and you have DEI infused in any of your operations, then your money will be yanked. So I thought one of the biggest problems we have in the state of Illinois is what they did in 2021 when they adopted the culturally responsive teaching and leading standards. And they did this not through the legislature. They did this through the JCAR, so Joint Committee on Rules. And that's what they did. And I just think I posted this on my Twitter. I guess I'll put it up on my Facebook because you guys are watching on Facebook. Maybe you don't follow me on Twitter. But this is chapter and verse DEI. You can't even, it's really hard. I mean, self-awareness. This is the culturally responsive teaching and leading standards. I'm reading from their section. You have to understand and value the notion that multiple lived experiences exist, that there is often not one correct way of doing or understanding something, and that what is seen as correct is most often based on our lived experiences. You have to approach their work and students with an asset-based mindset, affirming the validity of the students' backgrounds and identities. You have to let them explore their own intersecting identities, how they were developed, and how they will impact daily experience is in the world. Yep. You have to educate themselves about students' communities, cultures, and histories. These are teachers. Teachers have to do this. This is something for the teaching curriculum. You have to assess their own biases and perceptions and how they affect their teaching practice and how they access tools to mitigate their own behavior. Racism, sexism, homophobia, unearned privileges, Eurocentrism. This is part of the teaching standards at our universities. They're called culturally responsive teaching and leading standards. Systems of oppression, that's part B. Culturally responsive teachers and leaders understand that there are systems in our society, especially, but not limited to our school systems, that create and reinforce inequities, thereby creating oppressive conditions. Educators work actively against these systems in their everyday roles in educational institutions. The culturally responsive teacher and leader will understand the differences between prejudice, discrimination, racism, how to operate at the interpersonal, intergroup, and institutional levels, collaborate with colleagues to determine how students from different backgrounds experience the classroom, school, district, know and understand how the system of inequity has impacted them as an educator. Be aware of the effects of power and privilege and the need for social advocacy and social action to better empower diverse students and communities. The whole thing is infused with DEI. So this needs to go away. Otherwise, I would say federal funding for our universities go away. What are you going to do? What's your legislator going to do? Are they filing legislation right now to repeal the culturally responsive teaching and leading standards? It is. It's a bunch of BS. Thank you, Bob, for chiming in. It's a bunch of BS. That's exactly right. But we've got our work cut out for us Because if you have a student who is going through a teaching system, maybe they're at ISU, known to be our university for teachers, and they're approached with this, maybe they'll be the ones to blow the whistle that this is what's being taught them, because it's wrong. It needs to stop. And we need to treat individuals, as citizens, as Americans who have the same, who come up and expect equal opportunity and fairness. That's the best thing to do. Okay, just a short Facebook Live. Wanted to cover those 4 topics. Thanks for joining me and listening in.